Welcome, everybody. 3D LUTs, at last, something 3D that will benefit broadcasters. Mention 3D, and most broadcasters break out in a cold sweat with good reason. But don't worry, we're not revisiting 3D as a display technology today. Instead, we're diving into something far more relevant and less traumatic, the world of 3D LUTs. For those unfamiliar, LUTs, or lookup tables, are powerful tools used across all genres of television and feature film production. So whether you're in drama, documentary, live events, or commercial work, chances are you've come across the term 3D LUT, and if not, the actual files themselves. In the next 45 or 50 minutes, Steve and Kevin will guide you through the essentials, what LUTs are, the different type of LUTs, and how various sectors of the industry are using them creatively and technically. So, without further ado, Steve and Kevin, over to you.
Cindy, thank you for the intro. And Steve, hello again. Here we go.
Hey, Kevin. Always good to chat with you. We always have a good time doing these.
Steve, what are LUTs? We're throwing around another acronym.
Yeah, they're lookup tables that are just mathematical transforms or formulas that will take basically one color space and convert it to another, one format to another. One of the big uses for it is for taking a camera LUT that is a log footage off of camera, put it through a LUT to make 709 or 2020 color out of what to our eye looks like a very flat, very mushy video, but has a ton of contrast in it actually, and make it from what a camera has the best perception to what our eye has the best perception, and make it very usable.
So this is where I first came across LUTs, when basically production started using log and everybody on set is looking at each other going, "Ew, Pete know what he's doing," because that picture looks so washed out. Exactly. And, you know, number of times we put a LUT on it just so that 709 would look good on all the monitors and everybody in the production village could go, yeah, that's what I thought it was going to look like. And obviously that has the knock-on effect that it goes into post-production, because those LUTs have probably been built as part of the pre-production testing, and those LUTs are then applied to that log, that raw log footage, to give you the finished product.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that what a camera can see and pick up and what the human eye wants to see to get the maximum stop value contrast out of a camera doesn't necessarily look the best. But that's where a LUT comes in to do that transform and give us that dynamic range, but now give us that dynamic range in what the eye likes.
Yeah. And the other area where this is now appearing, and it's interesting that of those on the call today, nobody has used it yet, is live production. And we're going to talk about this and how it's aiding HDR productions to deliver both HDR and SDR simultaneously. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But to fill a bit more in on LUTs, there are lots of them. And if you want an in-depth LUT analyzing seminar, this is not what we're going to go through here. We're going to highlight what they are and where they're most applicable. And the first one of those, Steve, is a 1D LUT.
Yeah, a 1D LUT actually it just works on either red or green or blue independently, and there's no correlation or anything that happens between the colors. And we live in a world where the three colors are there together, and it's best if we can deal with all three of them together. And a 1D LUT works great for Luma, but for color,
Yeah, it's, as I said, this was my first experience of it, and it was simply turning S-Log to 709
yeah,
and on set. It's never used anywhere else in the production. It's just for confidence monitoring on set.
yeah, because it's simple.
Yeah. Now, something that's not so simple is a 3D LUT.
Yeah. And yeah, and you can see it down in the bottom right-hand corner. It's a three-dimensional cube of where all of the color points are. And typically you're going to see them as and we'll see this in a little bit, as a 33-bit LUT, because we are dealing with 10-bit video. So we have a LUT that at least has all of the points for the data that's actually coming into it.
So as I said, it starts off here. As I said, that the input sample creates a perfectly equidistant point within an RGB 3D cube. And that 3D cube represents all the points of both the color and light, represented by the values from 0 to 1. And then when the LUT is applied, the conversion represents those same points after they've been moved to their new location. And the LUT provides these new locations for each point of the conversion.
Yes, and just kind of keep note on some of the gaps that end up appearing that we're going to have to do something about when we do this move and move those color points to a new location.
So as I said, the 3D LUT, and you've given a sneak on this already, comes in various resolutions. And their usual types are either 17 point, 33 point, or 65 point. The bigger the grid number, the more detail and more subtle the color changes can be. And it's pretty common now, isn't it? We're seeing a 33 point LUT used within the broadcast industry for live production, high-end television production. And as you can see here, that's going to create nearly 36,000 color nodes.
Yeah, and yeah, it works really well with 10-bit, RGB SDI.
So in summary, the differences between a 1D and 3D LUT, are fairly straightforward. Obviously, the 3D LUT gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more accurate color reproduction. So let's dive a bit more into 3D LUTs, because this is like peeling an onion. Now we've started, we're going to take the next layer off. And there are two types of 3D LUTs. There's the trilinear and the tetrahedral. So Steve, the trilinear interpolation.
Yeah, so trilinear is just trying to fill those points without looking at some of the other data from the other channels. It's just going to take that green channel and try to smooth out the points and work out some of the spots that are missing in between the two. It's not a volumetric interpolation, if you will, of what's going on.
So the advantage of this, it's simple to implement. It's very efficient, it has a low overhead for processing, and it smooths out for basic color transforms. The downside is it can be less accurate in areas where there are rapid transitions. And if you take a look at a trilinear LUT interpolation on a waveform display, it can produce banding or less smooth gradients compared to the tetrahedral one.
Yes, and you can see it at the top up here where we have a lot of change, where basically a knee has been reintroduced into this Luma ramp, and the sawtoothing that takes effect. And if you do that same sawtoothing down in the blacks, because the eye is very sensitive to the blacks, you are definitely going to see banding and weird things happen in the shadows and the blacks from that.
So the tetrahedral, and so far I've done well and pronounced it right every time. But now we're going to put interpolation on the end of that. So instead of a simple trilinear interpolation, which works with cubes, the tetrahedral interpolation divides each cube into tetrahedral and performs interpolation within these simpler geographic volumes. So as you can see here, we have the cube previously, but now we have these two triangles within it.
Yeah, so it can take more points and draw from actually R, G, and B to help make the transitions.
And as I said, it handles non-linear color transforms a lot better.
Yes.
And as you'll see when we bring up the waveform now, it smooths out.
Yes.
Knee that we saw, the stepping, that jagged edge on previously, this smooths it out really nicely.
Yeah. I was first introduced to a tetrahedral with a tetrahedron. My dad was in the Air Force, and they used to use tetrahedrons, which is the trilinear shape of a device that can actually tell you the direction of airflow. And for people that are at airports that are non-manned, like in the wartime,
yeah,
they could see this thing from a long ways off and know exactly what the wind was coming across the ramp. But it's the same trilinear approach.
Excellent. So to summarize, here are the two side by side. And personally, I know which one I'd be preferring to use on a production.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. And the nice thing, the power that most devices have now, we have enough processing power in devices today to be able to handle tetrahedral LUT interpolation.
And as you can see there, it's quite obvious the difference. So in summary, there are criteria where trilinear is going to win out over tetrahedral and vice versa. And really, in summary, when to use trilinear? If you need speed and simplicity and can tolerate some minor quality losses. Whereas the tetrahedral, if you're after the best visual fidelity and can afford a bit more computing processing power, that's the way to go. And as Steve's just outlined there, processing power today isn't normally an issue, is it?
No, it's not.
So where is it used? And let's start off, as I said, in the world of live production, which is kind of rapidly adopting the use of 3D LUTs.
That looked like a shader that was trying to shade something that didn't want to go.
it does look like something's not right. Anyway,
Yeah.
so for those of you who attended NAB, OBS published a white paper, and I would recommend downloading this and having a read of this, because the OBS have now worked on SDR and HDR for a number of years across a number of games, and have been one of the key drivers to what's known as this single layer workflow. Because let's be honest, this HDR is a fantastic technology, because to the consumer, they don't need to understand the technology. The pictures look better. They look more realistic. They're more engaging. But the challenge we have as broadcasters is that those watching HDR are still the minority, and we've got to cater for the SDR majority. And unlike the days of 3D production, so apologies if anybody's now having flashbacks and nightmares, we can't go back to the days of having two trucks, can we, at a venue, one doing one production, one doing the other, Steve?
No, it's just not financially, we can't afford it. And the nightmare that it is for the production staff itself trying to track and rack HDR and then do this exact same for an SDR, and what it does to the production and switchers and everything else is just a nightmare.
Yeah. So for those of you in Europe, you'll be aware that we are now at the tail end of the football season. For those in America, soccer. And there have been a number of major finals over the last couple of days, which culminate in a major match in Munich at the weekend. And interestingly, if you look at the production format, it clearly states in there that the SDR feed is created via a LUT. And in this particular case, it's the NBC Universal LUT, which we will talk about a bit more in the future. But to give you an idea of the scale of these productions, this one has 31 cameras, and that took place in Bilbao in May, where Media Pro were the host technical broadcaster. We have a second match which took place in Poland, and this one, along with the NBC Universal LUTs, had a very interesting statement, Steve, about 1080i feeds will also be available only for on-site takers. Is this the end of 1080i as a broadcast format? I'll leave that one out there.
Yes.
This one was 26 cameras, and a good leader customer of ours, Polsat, were again providing the technical services for this. And then finally at the weekend, we have the basically the pinnacle of UEFA's football in Europe. And this is taking place in Munich. And again, look at that LUT, NBC Universal. And this production is going to feature 42 cameras. And we're very fortunate that our good friends in Hanover, TVN, are providing the host broadcast technical services for the production. So this is now not just those events that happen every 4 years. This is now filtering down and allowing HDR productions to be used basically now on a daily basis, Steve, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And if you're in the US, go and have a look on LinkedIn. There's pieces there how the Indy 500 this year used HDR. I think it was just over 100 cameras, wasn't there, Steve, at that event?
Yeah, for an Indy race, there was 100 cameras. Yep, it's nuts.
And again, they were using LUTs to match all of those cameras. Yeah. Slow-mos, drones, cinema cameras. It's a major production now, but it can be done. So what do we mean by this single layer SDR, HDR workflow?
Yeah, and this is something that NBC worked very hard on. One of the reasons they have the LUTs they have, because they came up with a way to be able to do all of the shading and camera control in SDR and have the HDR, the 4K feed, either 1080p HDR feed or 2160 HDR, track it and come out looking stellar. But this gave them the ability to just do all of the camera control at SDR and provide a beautiful SDR feed for what is at least 80% of the viewership. Because let's face it, we're still growing this HDR world of ours.
I mean, the great thing here is, there is a huge wealth of experience out there with camera shader, vision guarantee, racks, camera racking. As I said to Steve, whichever term doesn't offend you there, you have a phenomenal knowledge, and it's all based around what that SDR waveform looks like. So we don't want to throw that away. So basically the process is that HDR signal is converted to SDR. So that means there's got to be some kind of conversion product in there. And live production is all about simplifying things, because the less moving parts there are, the less things that can go wrong. So what we've done at Leader with our Zen series of waveform monitors is we've now added the ability for you to import a 3D LUT, which means you can apply that and see that on the picture, waveform and vector scope display, along with the CIE color chart. And if you're using a histogram, it works on that as well. So now you can see we've removed that conversion upstream. But the great thing is here that now is running exactly the same HDR to SDR 3D LUT that's being used to create the SDR program output. So this means what a vision engineer is seeing here is what the SDR looks like. And as Steve alluded to, the HDR will just naturally fall out and look absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and it simplifies the workload, and it reduces external products that are in series, reduces a failure point. There's just so much about it that makes it so much simpler. And you have the ability within the waveform monitor to look at the LUTed, you can look at the LUT output, or you can look at the raw output. And a lot of production now, let's face it, is actually being shot in 1080p. It may be up converted to 4K after the fact, but it's being produced in 1080p. And in 1080p, we can actually put the raw HLG feed, if it's a sport event, right next to the 709 on the front of the scope at the same time. And you can see both of them.
So the great thing with this also is that you've got a confidence monitor with that 3D LUT applied. So you can bring that up onto your monitor in front of you. So if it's SDI, and if you're working in 2110, our Zen series, the 5600 and 7600W, can also act as an IP to SDI gateway. So rather than having to then convert IP to SDI to bring it into a monitor, you've got the SDI LUTed output, and that can either be HD, Quad 3G, or now 12G SDI to that monitor. So again, it's removing the moving parts. It's simplifying the live production.
Yeah, and allows you to turn the LUT on and off with just a simple selection. And so you can see the raw HLG feed, or you can see the feed through the LUT in 709. And it's gorgeous to be able to do that. It's so simple.
So the bit that's probably going to really interest that is the HDR supervisor. So this is the kind of vision engineer, and he is responsible for looking at both the SDR and the HDR. It's quite possible in some trucks he's the only person that can see an HDR image, because if everybody else can see the HDR image, they say, oh, we want our pictures to look like that. And then suddenly you're in a chase your tail competition, because you're then focusing on the HDR and forgetting the SDR, which is probably paying for the truck to be at the venue. So as you can see here, we can apply that LUT that we've got here in the camera shading position. We can apply it to the HDR supervisor. And as Steve said, we have the ability on the 56 and 7600W to look at both the HDR and SDR side by side.
Yeah. And
so it gives him that ability to monitor and know he's comfortable with both program outputs from the truck.
Yeah, and can't emphasize it enough that it's your LUT. It's not our LUT. It is a LUT that you upload to the scope, and the scope can actually hold 10 different LUTs, and you can pick per the job you are doing which LUT you're going to use.
So
And
that's the HDR supervisor. There is another gentleman on the truck, the engineer in charge. Basically, the buck stops with him. So probably most of the time, he's going to be more interested in that kind of quality of service. So it's going to be stuff like your eye pattern, it's going to be your audio levels, it's going to be, if you're in the world of IP, it's going to be your inter-packet arrival time, it's the timing of PTP and black and burst and all that sort of stuff. But occasionally he will get dragged into quality of experience and asked to be able to monitor. So obviously we can also add the LUT to his waveform monitor to give him that ability to just double check, because if he's getting a phone call or some kind of message back from the broadcaster saying that there's something wrong with the signals coming out of your truck, he needs to be able to dial this up as well. And, you know, I can't reiterate this enough. It's removing the number of moving parts. It's making it simpler, isn't it?
It is. And one of the beautiful things, we knew how much this was needed in the industry, and Leader chose not to make it an option. It is part of the base of the scope. It was when we introduced the LUTs, we introduced them for free. All you need is to have the latest firmware updated in your scopes, and you automatically now have the ability to do LUTs.
So as we said, 56 and 7600W offer you 3D LUT cube file import. We don't create the LUTs. These are yours. And with the confidence monitoring output, it's just simplifying the whole production. As I said, so we're now removing the need for additional upstream and downstream 3D processing. You know, we're saving your rack space and power and cabling complexity. Well, saving rack space, if we're going to do that, you're going to put something else in there. So it's allowing you to put other pieces of kit into your truck. And obviously, signal latency. We're talking live events here. Latency is our biggest enemy. So going through multiple steps, the more you can remove, again, the better it's going to be. And as we said, we keep the SDR feeds in line with the HDR creative intent using the 3D LUTs, which are the same as the program output. So, you know, this has been used, Steve, hasn't it, on many major events now, and it's just simplifying everything for what in the past was a very complex workflow.
Yes. And, you know, everywhere that it's used, either with live production and post, that allows you to see what's going on and how you're using this.
So, as I said, we don't create these LUTs, but fortunately, there are some very commonly used ones out there, and I've already alluded to one. You saw that UEFA are recommending the NBC Universal LUT, and this gives you UHD, HDR to SDR, single master production workflow and recommendation and LUTs. And as I said, this has been developed by NBC Universal in collaboration with our very good friends at Chromarama and Nick Shaw. And it builds upon the ITU working group discussions for HDR operational practices. And that's involved the Dolby, BBC and Philips. So this isn't like a one-man campaign. This is an industry coming together to identify and solve a problem. And if you want to learn more about this, please visit GitHub, where you can download a wealth of information on white papers. You can download LUTs. You can go away and play with them and see what they do, and then maybe even start building your own that optimize for your production. And many of you, along with the NBC Universal LUTs, may well be familiar with the BBC and the work that they've done with LUTs. Obviously, this is predominantly focused around HLG because the BBC and NHK jointly developed this. but we're not here to talk about HDR and all of that today. But again, you can now download these LUTs free of charge. And I think last time I looked, there's about 15 to 18 different LUTs you can have a look at. So probably the most common one you'll hear people reference is 9C. That's the one that seems to be used the most by people. But they're free. So visit either of these websites and there is a wealth of information, isn't there, Steve, available to?
Oh, there is. There is. There's just a ton on GitHub about this.
Right. So now we've discussed the subject that apparently nobody's done, we'll go on to something that people might feel a lot more comfortable with. On-set production.
Yeah.
And as we said, go on, Steve.
Oh, I was going to say, we since we have the ability within the scope, you don't need necessarily to power up, because sometimes power is a concern. It's part of the scope. You can load your LUT that's going to take whatever your camera output is and make it so that you can look at it in a very pleasing view, instead of this squished, mushy looking view that the LUT or the log coming off the camera is going to give you.
So I've been on set. I've seen, let's be honest, LUT boxes. They're everywhere.
Yes.
Dick carts are a work of art from the point of view of both operational and technology. And each one is very individual. You know exactly how many times you loop it round through a LUT box, where you can pull out the 709, the 2020, the PQ, the whatever. And this is what they're doing. They're taking that raw image captured, and that, I mean, this slide's probably a bit out of date because it says scenes with 14 stops of dynamic range. I bet you we could probably go to 16 now quite comfortably and not get pulled up on this one. But the concept is the same, that is being brought down into that 709 color space, so that the great term here, the video village, can look at the content and think, yeah, that's what we're expecting to see. You know, that lady in the wardrobe can pick up that you can see that pin on the lapel, which is used to murder the character in about 4 scenes time, can be seen, and it's not kind of just lost in the shot. So
and you're not affecting the original log footage. You're just making it so that you can shade it correctly.
Yeah. But as I said, these LUT boxes, and this, several people have told me, is great, but they run off of AC power. And there will be times during a production where you basically go to what's known as on-set location production. And that's where you've got a scaled down crew. So it'll probably be your cameraman, your camera assistant, the DIT, and the sound guy. And there is no AC power. And that's where on the 5350, it can come into its own, because the LUT capability we've talked about is also supported on the LV5350, which can run off of batteries. So whether that be Anton Power or V-Lock. So this now means that along with being able to do this remotely, you've also got a 3D LUTed output, so that the production crew can view those images and be comfortable that you're recording it right first time, which, let's be honest, when you're getting to this stage, you've probably got one opportunity to shoot this right. You could be landing on some remote island. You could maybe only have the talent for a couple of hours. You need to get this right. So having the tools that ensure you get it recorded right first time, you know, are critical. And again, this comes free of charge. All you need to do is have the latest version of Zen series software loaded on your waveform monitor. Steve, post-production, an area that I think you're going to feel much more comfortable with now, aren't you?
Yes.
We're now in your backyard.
Now in my backyard, exactly. But yeah, let's face it, we need to be able to take that log footage, be able to bring it into our workflow, but be able to see it, in a visual resolution, so that when it's being graded, and even just doing the EDLs and putting them together, that we'll talk about, and come up with this to be able to see it. I would like to be able to see it, how the eye wants to see the data, and
So,
be able to do that actually in the scope is beautiful.
so talking to post-production clients, customers I have over here in Europe, even if it's not being delivered as HDR, it's probably being acquired and graded as HDR, because you've got to future-proof your assets. And most colorists now are very, very good at knowing what the SDR output's going to look like. But they may occasionally have a scene that they're thinking, have I pushed it too far? Is it going to lose that artistic intent in SDR because of this? And the method that you'd have to use in the past, or most people use today, is to basically create a Dolby trim pass. So you mark it in and out, create a trim pass, and create an SDR clip, which you then view. But the beauty with the leader LUT is you can put that LUT onto the waveform monitor and switch it on.
Yes.
You don't create the Dolby trim pass.
And that trim pass takes time.
It does if you have to do the whole 90 or 200 and whatever minute movie. So, but the other challenge we also see now is, yes, you're grading an HDR, but how many deliverables have you got? You've got your 709 at 100 nits, you've got your Rec 2020 at 1000, you've got a myriad of them. And we can store up to 10 LUTs on the waveform monitor. So it means that you can very quickly and easily punch in and out and check all of the LUTs, all of your deliverables, without having to create a Dolby trim pass. So I think that's going to be a huge saving, isn't it, in that production workflow?
Yeah. And you could do that just by pulling the LUT in you want, or if there's a completely different setup on the waveform monitor, set up a set of presets, and that'll set up the waveform monitor and pull in the LUT that you've set for that particular preset.
Yeah. And I've had a customer tell me he's used this where basically he's created an SDR LUT which is being used as a screener, so that the execs can come in and view the EDL they've created, as you said, without having to create an SDR version, and just make sure that the EDL flows and the story is told how they're expecting it before they then start going in doing all the grading, the VFX, and all of the audio stuff.
Yeah, and this can be done off the raw log footage brought into the scope. The scope will give you the SDI out off of the LUT, as well as a raw SDI out. And you can use that LUTed output to run the projector so you can make sense of that EDL you're trying to create.
And again, all we say is go to the Leader Fabrics website, go to software, download the latest Zen series software for your product, and you get this functionality. What more can we ask for? So in summary, we talked about the Leader Zen series of products, and there are 5 of them in the group, from the 5350A, 5350, 7300 rasterizer, and the 56 and 7600W. And all of them support this ability to import and load a 3D LUT, so you can do your SDR, HDR productions. And this works on the picture, waveform, vector, CIE color chart, and the histogram. And we can support up to 4 channels in HD or 1 channel in UHD. and a maximum of 10 cube files can be registered.
And it's a standard everyday 33-bit cube file. Nothing fancy.
Yeah.
Translation needed.
As we said, this is going to simplify simultaneous HDR and SDR production. For those who remember right at the beginning, as Steve said, it's a 33-point tetrahedral interpolation. It offers an SDI output with a 3D LUT conversion and input-output conversion with gamma. So SDR, HDR, all of the normal transfer characteristics, color imagery, so BT 2020, 709, and DCI compatible.
Yes. And as Kevin said, in using this in a IP environment in 2110, we will give you a SDI output to drive your monitors. So if you're taking login and you want a PQ output, you get your PQ output and you can actually run that to your HDR monitor right off the 2110, straight out of the scope.
And finally, it supports both full and narrow range video.
But of course.
And we also have the ability to display that header information, because this has always been people's concerns, isn't it? Have I got the LUT on? Is it switched off? We can actually burn that into the picture display on the waveform, so you can see the LUT is on and you can see which LUT you've got loaded, because it takes the header information and displays that as well. So, you know, I can't say you won't double LUT something, but we're trying to give you all the tools so that you know that a LUT has been applied before you then try and correct it, thinking you're compensating. So how have we done, Steve? Look at that. 45 minutes.
Pretty well, yes. We've just about landed right on time.
We did. And this is where we'll bring Cindy back in. And have we had any questions, or does anybody have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? We've got a few questions that I'm just going to say for you to take separately, because they're very specific to a particular thing. So do we have any other questions for Steve and Kevin? Just put it in the chat.
All of the questions, as Cindy said, Kevin and I will go through and answer those specific questions. We answer 100% of every question we get. We don't always have time online, and Cindy said, yeah, we've got to kind of keep these questions kind of general.
Yeah, and so here's one that I think everyone will love. For live events and broadcasts, would the HDR supervisor be viewing HDR and SDR images on separate displays or monitors for both HDR and SDR at their respective brightness or nit levels? And if so, wouldn't this be difficult for their eyes to handle both viewing of both these live images at the same time, all the time during the live show? So there's a question. What do you think?
Not been in that position. I honestly can't tell you personally.
Fair.
So, I mean, I'm going to talk from personal experience. Now, this is not on a truck, but this is in a what they call a live grading suite, where this has been like with a major event, and they have had both HDR and SDR monitors in the same room. I wouldn't say side by side, but they've been in close proximity.
Yeah, I would think they would place them far enough away that, yes, that you could maintain focus on the one you want.
Yeah, I mean,
walk from one to the other.
I mean, the guy is definitely going to have an HDR monitor in there because he needs to see what it's going to look like on a reference monitor.
Yeah.
Lots of those will have it such that they're using the payload ID, so that when they switch from HDR to SDR, it switches the monitor over as well.
Yeah.
So they're probably using a grade 1 reference monitor that can do 2020 HDR, whether that be PQ or HLG, but then also it can be switched down to 709 SDR. And that's, where the VPID information, and again, if you're using the leader scopes, they will take that, if you're using it in IP, they will take that payload ID information, which could be part of your -40 ancillary data. It could be part of the session description protocol file, and it will insert it into the vertical interval on the SDI stream, so that any device downstream that's using payload ID for switching will be correctly set.
Yes. It'll
Okay.
switch from 709 to whatever the HDR is that you are running. The whole scope can do that also. If you put the scope in and you feed it different data, you can actually tell the scope to follow the payload ID for color imagery and for HDR, SDR, and the scope will actually switch back and forth just based on the payload ID.
Personally, I like to know, I don't like it switching myself. I like to have the alarm set so that I know I'm looking at 2020 HLG, and if suddenly a signal comes in and it is 709, I've got the warning messages that maybe somebody has routed the wrong camera feed to me or something, or it's not converted or something.
Yeah, you'll get the mismatch alert on the screen.
Yeah, so that you can correct it before your client rings up to say, that HDR, those two SDRs look very similar. Possibly must be something to do with the way it's lit.
Sandy?
Yeah, another question here. Is there a way to prevent double LUTs by mistake?
There is a way. I mean, as I said, we have the ability to burn in onto the picture display on the waveform monitor itself an indicator saying that the LUT is on, and it will then give you the information. So it will say, like, it's, you know, NBC Universal blah blah blah, or BBC 9C LUT. It's on the screen. It is not burnt into the confidence monitor output.
Yeah.
But saying that,
the only other thing I could say is just good engineering practices.
Yeah, it's not impossible to double LUT it, because somebody might decide to switch off that burnt-in display on the monitor. But as I said, if you're looking at the waveform display, the CIE color chart, and the vector display, they will clearly indicate that a LUT has been applied. You'll see that built into the kind of detailed information that surrounds, especially the vector scope display. It will tell you that there's a LUT applied.
That's great. So we're going to take your GitHub and BBC links and really all the product links that we talked about today and send everyone here an email with the link to the replay of this and all those useful links. And I just wanted to reiterate that to everybody.
And as always, Cindy, thank you so much for all your support and help.
Yeah,
definitely
and
appreciate it.
And to everybody out there, our contact details are on the screen. So if you do now get a live production 3D LUT requirement and you're thinking, those two guys, they spoke about it, but I wasn't quite sure what, now I know what they're talking about, but I need clarification. If you're in North America, or if you're in America, basically, Steve's your man. And if you're over here in Europe, I'm here to help. So we thank you for joining us. Hopefully you found that interesting. We've been informative, we've educated, and hopefully, most of all, it's been entertaining, Steve.
Yes, everybody, we want to thank you very much for watching our presentation here. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a good day, everybody. All the best.
Yeah.